have the sailor's wife, and she was dressed in blue. And in one corner of the funny little thing, she had a lifeboat crew. She had a lifeboat crew, me boys, the rowlocks and the oars, while in another corner the Marines were doing for. She had those dark and dreamy eyes, and a whiz-bang up her jacksie. She was one of the flash girls, one of the old brigade. Next we come to the soldier's wife, and she was dressed in black. And in one corner of a funny little thing, she had a Union Jack. She had a Union Jack, me boys, the old red, white and blue, while in the other corner were the signals coming through. She had those dark and dreamy eyes, and a whiz-bang up her jacksie. She was one of the flash girls, one of the old brigade. Next we come to the airman's wife, and she was dressed in beige. And in one corner of a funny little thing, she had a Handley page. She had a Handley page, me boys, the engine on the throb, while in the other corner was an airman on the job. She had those dark and dreamy eyes, and a whiz-bang up her jacksie. She was one of the flash girls, one of the old brigade. Last we come to the undertaker's wife, and she was dressed in red. And in one corner of a funny little thing, she had 100 dead. She had 100 dead, me boys, the coffins there as well. And in the other corner there was bloody Mary Hell. She had those dark and dreamy eyes, and a whiz-bang up her jacksie. She was one of the flash girls, one of the old brigade.
Hello friends and gamers, and welcome to the Allied Strategic Conference for turn number 8. Now, I know I'm a little bit behind with this because Germany has already released 9.1 and have done a bunch of their moves as well. So, despite that, I have to go ahead and keep on going on, right? I won't cover so much German strategy as in the short-term German strategy, but I will touch on long-term strategy. Now, I'll quickly update you what happened on the German turn. They captured Netherlands with moderate losses, not huge, but moderate losses. They captured Yugoslavia with about equal losses there. Germans ended up losing, I think he said roughly 10 or 11 infantry class units across the board, which is not bad. That's already 30 IPPs worth of income. That's, well, not quite a full turn's income, but it's a decent amount of income lost. He's convoy rated me for about $8. I need to relook at his video to double check, but I think it's about $8. And I do get to roll some defense on those convoy lines now, which is nice. What else? I think that's about it. He also captured this part of Poland here, Lubelski, as well as made an attempt on Lithuania for that buck to steal it away from the USSR. But as we see in the German turn, he's making lots of efforts against the Allies and very little effort against the Comintern. Now, will his strategy pay off? Time will tell. But one thing I will tell you is the Allies and the Comintern seem to have formed an alliance. Now, last turn, the Comintern built the USSR built 3 transports. Now, their transports, combined with their Marines, their 2 Marines, their 4 infantry, a light tank, and a cavalry, means that they can drop off 6 units anywhere they like. Now, they could, of course, be going for Sweden and Norway. I mean, Sweden will give them $3, Norway will give them, I think, another $3. No, $2. So that's not bad. It's not a bad place to land over there. But perhaps he'll do a more ambitious event and go after England. Now, before we go on to the details of that, let's see why he would go on to England. The psychology of Stalin. Now, in my mind, Hilltop Pillbox, though he's an experienced gamer in Axis and Allies and BBR, he's not experienced in this game, and one of the features of this game is that it allows a lot of alt history. So in my, I don't know, maybe 24 games I've played with people, new players tend to really like this quite a bit. Their eyes like gleam, and they just love the concept of playing alt history stuff where different things happen across the board. I've seen all kinds of different combinations of these things, so it doesn't surprise me, and it makes sense, and they can be actually a lot of fun too, some of the alt history stuff. But I think the developers and history itself lays itself down a certain pathway, and that's the most natural route to follow, and also the most beneficial route to follow too, I would say, in some sense. It's geared towards a certain direction, because history is also geared towards that direction. If Germany wants to do a sea line, then it has to be strong enough to hold the seas from a counter sea line to capture this area. If Russia decides to go for England, then it has to be okay with the concept of facing the Americans in that fight as well. So what tends to happen is kind of a natural fight. After people have a few games out of their system, they tend to go more of a natural route, where Germany and USSR are mortal enemies, and they will stay mortal enemies game to game to game to game. That seems to be the tendency that I've observed across my games. Now, it's fun, like I said, to play alt history, and I'm not knocking down anybody's strategy or techniques or what they want to do. It's a lot of fun, so it'll be fun to see how this pans out. Now, the psychology of Hilltop is kind of covered. If that is what he's doing, then yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Of course, he could be doing other things like going ups in some obscure way after Germany by building up a fleet and being able to threaten North and East, Western and Eastern Germany. So that's a nice asset to have in his pocket, especially now that he's got a large fleet assembled here to protect against any airborne attacks. And especially if he has an air base here, well, he can't see it on the map, but in Leningrad, and puts a few units out there to help scramble to that position, so that's not too bad. You could threaten Germany, and it could be an asset to you. That way it prevents the entirety of the German forces to head that way, and he has to keep at minimum 3 or 4 or 5 units in Western and Eastern Germany just to protect it, as well as West Poland, East Prussia, etc. So it's not a bad strategy, and you often see it in reverse with 2 or 3 German transports threatening an attack here and being able to shuck troops pretty quickly into Leningrad if they capture that area, or at least into Estonia, and function as almost like a second railway if a person does it right. So seeing it this way, it might be an attack against Germany, but there's cheaper ways to go into Germany, because at the end of the day, you're still facing an amphibious assault. So if, as the USSR, you're going to attack Germany, it makes most sense to go across this border. Now, my advice to Hilltop Pillbox would be, if you're planning on declaring war on Germany, declare war on them before they declare war on you, because I believe that gets rid of that Soviet surprise strike that the Germans get. So it makes all kinds of sense to me to already be at war at an earlier date. But I think, unless the Soviets are going after neutrals, they're going after the British Commonwealth and Great Britain. Now, where would they land? Are the British strong enough to hold out? Now, in my mind, like I said, I consider myself maybe not a good player. I think I am a good player, but I'm not going to say that. Especially with the Allies, I'm not necessarily a good player. I don't have very much experience with them. But in my experience, this is generally not done as a common turn. Now, what was I going to say? I can't recall. Anyways, where would the USSR come? If the USSR invaded here, they're going to be facing with 6 units, they're going to be going against 7 units. An infantry at 5, 3 militia at 3, and 3 fighters at 6. That's a tough one to beat. And it's because of city territories, and then they're also going to be facing an amphibious assault. The Russians would be bringing 2 Marines and perhaps, well, anything up to 4 additional infantry, or more likely a light tank and maybe a cavalry to attack this position. But that means on the first round, they're going to be operating at a reduced rate. They're having, let's say, 3 or 4 infantry. Let's say 4 infantry rolling at 2. Yeah, 4 infantry types rolling at 2. And a heavy cruiser shore bombarding at 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 make, that works out to 10. 10 combat power. Now in defense we have 3, 3, 3, that's 9 plus 5. We're already at 14, not to even bring these into the picture. 14 plus another, what is that, 6, 12, 18. 14 plus 18, we're in the big bucks, right? Oh no, sorry, is it 14? That's 12. Yeah, I'm at 12, yeah, 18. So 18 again, yeah, 14 plus 18. We're already looking at a substantial force in defense of London. So he's not going to make an attempt against London. He would lose, I think. And all he would do would be make another enemy for very little gain. Because with, I know on the second round he'd have a few more. He'd have his light armor and his cavalry in the picture. So that's, he'll be at 10. He'll be at, if he's very lucky, he'll be at, well, actually it won't even be, it'll be 15, but you're still looking at 14 plus 18 on this side, right? So a nice force of defense. So he's not going after London. Is he going after the British Midlands? Well, if he goes after the British Midlands, he's facing 6, 12, 18, 19, 20. 20 against his 10 on that first round of combat. I have the advantage on the first round, and if I'm lucky, I'll take out 2 of his units. But on the subsequent round, he's going to be strong. Well, he'll be stronger, and I can't take as many hits as he can with his. All the hits that he takes off of me is going to take big steps out of my combat power, where all of his stuff is going to just take little steps like that out of his combat power. So he's likely not going for British Midlands. He may go for British Midlands. Unlikely to go to London. British Midlands is a possibility. More likely in my mind is Northern England. It has a minor factory. It's worth $3, same as British Midlands, but it also puts you a little bit further away from any response attack from London. Now, he would go for British Midlands if it meant that he can wipe out these aircraft. If he goes up here, he would take the factory, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to scramble to that position, which I may not do. I'll debate it, but I may not do it if he goes up there. If I didn't scramble, it allows me to wait, mass up troops by moving up here, and the subsequent round use my heavy hitters against that position, as well as my 2 fighters, which are in the sea over here, that can respond to that combat. Now, there's also a strategic bomber in the mix somewhere too that might be able to hit, an airborne 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, there's things I may be able to do, maybe not. I'd have to calculate the distances, but there is a chance he's going for Northern England for the factory or British Midlands to wipe out the aircraft. Now, lastly, is Scotland. He may divert 1 transport load to drop off in Scotland, but that reduces his combat power to drop in the other areas. So we don't really know what he's going to do, but I predict it'll either be 1 transport up here and 2 down here, or it'll be 3 in British Midlands. Now, not guaranteed, of course, but that is a possibility. Now, he may pull back from kind of aggressive moves because there's a certain amount of prestige that goes on with this game as well, since it's a YouTube war. So he may pull back from doing something ambitious. It'll be a calculation between how much fun does he want to have experimenting and how much is he okay with the concept of having some egg on his face if it goes horribly wrong. That's my take of the situation of what the Russians will do. Now, if he does make an attack move, it won't just be in British Islands. It'll also be here. If he makes an attack here, he doesn't just have 2 infantry here. He has these fellows up here. You may think the distance is too big, but it's sufficient. He just goes 1, 2, using the Caspian Sea as a booster, kind of. So 1, 2, 3 into either one of these territories, and 4 back into Transcaucasus or Turkmenistan. There's no airport here, but each one of them, he could send a fighter here, and our tactical bomber here, and his fighter here, and clean up quite quickly and land back in Transcaucasia or Turkmenistan without a problem. So you could pick up these 2 territories. Now, I could respond to that by moving up some infantry from this position and these infantry in Syria. I'm not too far off from being his enemy over here. And on excuse me, on some level, I actually don't mind if he declares war on me. Of course, it doesn't make me look great either. The idea of being able to be attacked by not an ally necessarily, but an unusual bedfellow, let's put it that way. Because if he does do that, if he does attack me, then I don't mind that too much, because right now he has the most victory points. And I can't actually go head-to-head against him until Germany is defeated. So if the USSR attack me, like right now he's ahead, if the USSR attacked me, then I could start making moves against places like here, Spain, and recollect one of my victory points back from getting Spain. Because one of my victory points is having Spain, Norway, Sweden has to be free of communist influence. So that allows me to start decreasing his victory points there, as well as in other parts of the world, where I can slowly take him back places. And even some of his valuable territory here in Transcaucasus is worth looking at as well. So that is a point, I think. The unfortunate thing is the rules don't have a space for this rule, for this kind of stuff, where the Americans aren't impacted by London falling to the communists. Now, my advice for a quick fix on that would be something like this. American income, peacetime income increase, just as isolationists, they get 0 income increases up until Paris falls. Once Paris falls, then the Americans get 1d12 peacetime income increase. Once London falls to anybody, they get additional 1d12 peacetime income increase. So they get 2 dice and more rapidly step into the war. Now, it could be the other way around too. If London is in Axis or Comintern hands, but Paris is in French hands, then yeah, just keep it with 1d12, that kind of thing. Maybe that whole concept could be extended too by saying, well, if Calcutta is in Axis hands, and maybe Sydney is in Calcutta in Axis hands, but maybe that's stepping too far. For right now, maybe just the major powers, London and Paris. And that way, you're kind of covered regardless of who does the alt history, because it makes no sense that the communists would go into Russia and like the Americans would be bothered by Axis going into London, but they wouldn't be bothered by communists taking over London. That's just my advice on what I would tweak to fix that. Ultimately, not a big deal though. I like playing these games, and you know what? I am playing these games within the bounds of the rules. I'm not making up anything else. I'm not trying to twist anything. It was a debate for me to use the French income to declare war on Iran. Like up until James was even doing his turn, I was sending him texting, no, cancel that. No, go ahead and do that. Back and forth, because I wanted to try this out to see if it was a good fix by the developers. And you know what? I've had people tell me, like, argue vehemently saying, like, that's a broken rule. The Allies, the French, could declare war every single time, and it totally makes sense for them to declare war if that's, you know, like, the penalty to the American is minor, it's inconsequential, it's huge penalty to the Axis player. I disagree. I think this using the French income to declare war on Iran is a mistake. I mean, not a mistake because I don't consider a mistake because I did it deliberately. But I don't think it's a strategy that people will employ regularly. They might occasionally. I think in this circumstance it kind of benefited me because it keeps the communists from taking over Iran because he was all gathered up on the border for doing it. But, you know, it may not actually pay off because now they have this unholy alliance between the Axis and the USSR. And so therefore now I'm the common enemy between the two. But if it had gone a more classic route, then 100% I would stand by my actions here. But I still think it's not economically beneficial whatsoever for the Allies to do it. So it's odd, like I get feedback from people saying, it's a broken rule, it's totally exploitable by the Allies, and it's something that the Allies should do every single time. But then other people who say completely opposite and say it's like completely destroys the Allied chances, screws everybody over, and not that good. And you know what? I'm in the camp that it's actually not a good move. But it's controversial, right? Which is why I wanted to try it out. Some people say it's unsportsmanlike because it takes such an advantage of, it screws over the Axis because they lose $10, and it assists the Comintern by giving them 2d12 dice rolls, and so it screws over the Axis even more. But on the flip side of that, you're also, every time you're boosting up the communists, you're screwing your own allies over as well. Like if the Comintern goes up, the allies suffer in that too, because it's a three-way fight. It's not like Axis and allies where it's a two-way fight. It's a three-way fight. Axis and allies and Comintern. So this move here, despite people saying it's something that allies should do every single time, and that's why they ban it because it's so unsportsmanlike, I disagree. I say let them have that option to do so, because I don't think it's a brilliant idea. It's something to try out if you wanted to, but it's not a brilliant idea. That's what I would say on that one. And I know that's a bit of a tangent, but I wanted to speak on that one. Something I wanted to try out, something I did deliberately. If it's a mistake, well, tough to say, but I don't think it's the ideal thing for the Allies to do. It's definitely not a classic thing that the Allies should do. All right, so I've covered the USSR strategy of what they may do. They may be a little bit more cautious because prestige is involved and not go into Great Britain, but they may instead go into the neutral nations like Norway and Sweden, but they may just do it because there might be some prestige in succeeding in doing it too, right? So that prestige could work against them, but it could also propel them forward. All right, so that's the USSR analysis of their strategy. Now the German strategy is clearly, as we've seen from 9.1, to be passive towards the USSR at this stage. They're fortifying, they're protecting, they're anticipating to be that center of the egg, the core of the apple. Well, maybe not the core of the apple, but they're anticipating being in the center of a conflict that will bypass them completely, which they may do to some extent. The Panzer King expects, with his fortifications on Paris and Warsaw, that he will protect himself against a USSR attack. At the same time, the battle will rage all around them. The Allies and the Comintern will kind of negate each other. In the meantime, he'll peck away at us with strategic rockets and diminish our power in our factories. He'll peck away at them, reducing their value, and that kind of thing. So it is not a bad strategy to do as Panzer King, kind of turtle in some sense, but I'd describe it more of a hedgehog, right? Where you have all these factories and a good system, good tech. You may not have huge income, but the fact that, he does have huge income, but the fact that the war will kind of rage in the peripheries to the north, and as well as, to the east, I suppose, in both directions, so he doesn't have to worry. He just has to hold on to his Central Europe, and hopefully the Comintern and the Allies bash each other over the head sufficiently. So that is his strategy. He'll keep his stuff a little bit away from the borders so that it's not pecked away at by the opponents, but he'll also bide his time, grow in strength, decrease our economy with strategic rockets and convoy raiding, and hopefully the USSR does the work for him, and the Allies do his work for him too by decreasing the victory points of the Comintern. So not a bad strategy for him. That is my prediction. Now, what about the CCP and the KMT? That's the only other conflict that is out here. And since we're dealing more with the CCP side of things and the Comintern side of things, what do we expect here? Well, this is a bit of a muddle right now. But I have 3 fighters and a stack of infantry, 2 militia, a few extra cannon fodder here in the form of cavalry. So he could easily, he may not wipe me out. He may do some damage against me, but he'll be weak enough that the Japanese can come swinging in there to take him out. But I expect he's going to hold his forces here. He's probably going to go and attack Yunnan, recapture it, and kind of fulfill, in some sense he'll have fulfilled his promise because he will have let me take Yunnan. He just didn't specify how long he'll let me hold on to Yunnan. Which, fine, that's 100% fine. But he'll do something similar to what Germany is, maybe not quite. But I expect he's going to feed Lend-Lease to the USSR from this position. He'll, in some sense, hedgehog, but all of his spare economy is going to go straight into the USSR. That's my prediction. He will eventually, of course, take out Manchuria and probably do it fairly rapidly, where he'll grab Rihi and Korea in one fell swoop, as much as he can, or in the, I know it's not going to be immediate, but in 2 turns or something like that. Or he'll build a couple airborne and drop them off in Korea, and that way he can hold on to his coastal areas right quickly, and then the Soviets will come in and pick up these 3 extra bucks here in the interior for the victory point bonus. That's what I would say the CCP will do. They'll rapidly take out these Japanese territories. They'll eventually kick me out of the mainland as well as Hong Kong, and then they will then they'll have a fairly good thing going on. And they don't really need to expand at that point. They have all the victory points they need. All they have to do at that point is feed any excess income they have that they're not using in defense back into the Soviet nation. I think that's what I would do in their position. Now, we saw in 9.1 that the Germans have taken over Holland, which means that the Japanese are unlocked to make any attacks they want to against the FEC. Will they go into Calcutta this turn? That is debatable. I don't think they have the strength. They have 4 infantry plus 2 marines. I have 2 anti-aircraft here. That's strong enough force that they may hold off with their aircraft. I could match every aircraft with 1 shot with AA. If they do go, they will go now, though, before this fortification is built. Otherwise, this clock is ticking and they'll run out of time. So we may see this transport wiped out. We may see an attack here fairly quickly. And that will be something else, too. It's 5d12 for the Americans, and they won't be turning their noses up at that. It'll definitely help against potential USSR conflict. So that's what we may see here, an attack next turn against this place. Now, will they win? Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 militia, 3 infantry, 2 anti-aircraft. He's got 4 infantry, 2 marines. Now, with this being a city area, I expect I'll do 2 or 3 casualties on that first round of combat against his land forces. Now that means if I do 3 casualties, that means he's already going to be down to 3 infantry left over. At that point, he won't have any more shore bombardments left. He will be in a tough position to win that fight. He may still win that fight, but he'll be definitely in a tough position. So we may see a combat there. I don't know, though. That's a tough one to say. There is a chance of it, though. There's a chance for it, because he's not going to antagonize the Comintern now that the Comintern is going to go after the Allies. That's my thinking on that one. So he won't go invade China. He won't go invade USSR if the USSR is already fighting a battle against the Commonwealth. He will also take the battle against the Commonwealth by either invading here immediately, or he'll invade all the surrounding areas and turn by turn just decrease my strength there, which I think would actually be the better idea. Drop off troops wherever he can on the coastal areas, pick up the income from there. That rapidly reduces my income here. And yeah, I mean, you could go for the kill here, but then I could lend these some units here as well. And yeah, maybe it'd be a bit of a longer fight. So we may see some action from the Japanese this turn, which would be exciting to see. I hope they hold off one turn. and I kind of wish I wasn't the victim to all the Axis and the Comintern, but you know, that's just the way it is some games, right? It's still a lot of fun, and I still enjoy myself quite a bit. So we're going to see some action, I predict, here next turn. I mean, this one I don't feel 100% confident with. They may, well, somewhere in India. There's a chance he's going to attack there, and at the very least he might attack Hong Kong, Burma, Bengal, Maharashtra, southern India, Ceylon. He might pick off these areas, but he might not. There's also a chance he's going to go in this direction and aim for Sydney. Now, it's a bit of a stretch because he'd have to use a surprise move for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to drop off in Sydney. And his battleships wouldn't be able to bombard, but he could do some damage, and he could drop off 4 infantry here. I don't know if his aircraft could reach, though. But I think it's, yeah, so that's a little bit less likely. More likely is an attack here, now that he's not held back by the Netherlands. But perhaps he's just going to keep a sedate pace and enjoy the income he gets from the Money Islands and just keep thriving as it is right now. That's also an option. I'm positioning my submarines kind of off of his convoy routes, but in a position where I can dive in and take a stab at his convoy lines if need be. And so we'll see how well that goes. Now, I think that covers my idea of the Japanese strategy, what they're going to do, the Soviet new menace that they offer, as well as the Germans. And I think that's a long enough video. I could, of course, touch on the Italians, but I predict there's not going to be much action as long as this fleet remains at its same strength. The next British turn, this is going to be repaired, and so therefore it becomes a little bit more intimidating to them as well. So I may also, depending on what the Russians do, I may drop a unit off here as well. I'm going to start pursuing the submarine down south over here. I haven't forgotten about it. It's just been other matters in mind of reducing these ones here. Why go south when there's other targets to be had up here? So that's the idea behind that. So the Italians will probably wait until they have sufficient forces to win this fight, or at least decrease me to just marginal strength before they do anything. But I can compete with that by sending 1 or 2 ships there every once in a while, and also building an air base here just to keep them in check, right? That's my plan with them. And that's about it, people. That is my idea of what this conference strategy is. As the Allies, I can't do too much until Germany goes to war against Comintern. It'll be primarily a defensive strategy. Now, next turn, if the Soviets don't attack me, then I'm going to prepare against the Soviet attack. This realization came a little bit late to me. I mean, part of that was just focusing on the German submarine menace. And now that that's kind of dealt with, then my eyes are kind of opening up to other issues I need to be concerned about. But London will survive this turn, I expect, unless there's some tricks up some sleeves. But I predict London will survive, so next turn we could drop off, 5 units? 5 units in London, and begin taking back whatever the Russians take from us. And again, I'm not too bothered by Russian invasion. Of course it'll be a pain in the butt, because that means I have 2 enemies instead of 1. By the same token, it also allows me to start pecking away at the Russians, because at the current rate, the Russians are winning the game. So by Russians going to war against the Allies, it means it opens up a new door where I can start taking them down. That is the plan, people. Thank you all for watching, and you all have a great day.